All right, everyone. Welcome to season 2 of Show Choir Nation, the flagship podcast of Homeroom Show Choir. Boy, we are really happy to be here for season 2. I am your host, William. Alongside me to the bottom of the screen is my season-long co-host, Ethan, and I am super duper excited to welcome our guest for today, Dylan. Dylan, how are you doing?
I'm good. Will, how are you doing today?
I am doing phenomenal. It is the 6th day of Christmas. I have my light up Christmas suit on. Got to bring the festive vibes to the show. You know, this is the rare December Show Choir podcast, although I will say it's been a pretty tremendous week for Show Choir podcasts. Within about the last 7 days, we've had an episode of Southern Shows drop from Bradley Davis. Really recommend that. 2 episodes of the warm-up room dropping from Dobbs and Aiden over there. Really recommend that too. I think their 2 episodes total like 4 hours. So it's not for the faint of heart. But yeah, Ethan, I guess I never asked you how you're doing tonight. Ethan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. And I so knew you were going to show up in a suit of some sort.
Oh, really?
I knew you were going to wear something. I knew you were going to be out of the box, out of ordinary. But yeah, I'm doing great. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to everyone who celebrated, and Happy New Year almost with the month coming up. And then, what is it, 4 days till choir starts again, show choir?
Oh, yeah. It's like 4 or 5, yeah.
That's insane. So I know a lot of groups are still practicing. I know many don't even do anything in January besides practice, but some people get out of the gate fast, and we're excited to cover it. I'm excited for a whole new season, Will, to cover it. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, and even like taking a bit of a longer look down the road, because this is going to be a bit more of a kind of national full season focused show. I don't want to brag too much, but Ethan and I, we are super excited to be the live stream hosts for the Mount Zion Show Choir Invitational this March. We kind of talked about Premier Comps a little bit in our last episode about a month and a half ago. Mm-hmm. But when Ethan and I, we got word from Stream Show Choir that we were going to have this opportunity. And it's really special for both of us. I think Ethan more so than myself. But just even before we knew that Mount Zion was going to be one of the premier comps of the year, just getting the opportunity to host a live stream in a more formal setting is something that I know I was super excited about. Ethan, as a Mount Zion alum, plus Mount Zion being one of the premier comps of the year this year, what can you say 2 months ahead of time about announcing the Mount Zion live stream?
So it's gonna be special. I first definitely want to thank the guys at Stream Show Choir for bringing this up, because again, they could have picked any 2 nut jobs in the whole world to do this, and thankfully they landed on us. This is actually like my second time doing a live stream at Mount Zion. Now the first time wasn't really like the full extent that we will be doing this upcoming season, but it was a small glimpse of like, this is kind of fun. I would like to do this in previous seasons. Last time we just said little blurbs here and there for the COVID audience, but it was something pretty fun to bring into light, especially at Mount Zion. Last year the comp was pretty small, and many were like, what's going to happen with the Mount Zion Invitational coming into it? And boom, we were hit with a lineup that we know that is going to be insane. Very excited to be covering it. As an alum, it's going to be very close to my heart. Some people get to experience Mount Zion High School, which might surprise a few people of how small of a school/town we are, but how amazing our facilities are. Very excited for everybody to come down to Mount Zion and see what we're about. So, yeah, I'm super excited to be doing this with you, Will, and Stream Show Choir.
Awesome. Well, we're going to stop bragging about ourselves. That's enough about ourselves. What we're now going to do is that we are going to brag about Homeroom Show Choir as a site, because the 3 of us and our entire staff at Homeroom Show Choir is really busy right now, just going through all of the season previews, all of the groups to watch, all of the director changes, everything like that. We are previewing 225 different groups ahead of this show choir season. Is it the biggest show choir preview in history? No one knows for sure, but we're pretty confident in saying that is one of the biggest.
We'll take it. We'll take it for sure.
So we have approximately 150 of those group previews out. You can view them all by going to homeroomshowchoir.com/blog and seeing all of the content from Connecticut to California and everywhere in between. Check out our Return of the Contenders series. Check out our state-specific previews. I know, Dylan, you've been working on a ton of our Illinois stuff as well. So just want to brag a little bit on the site as well before we get into the usual jibber jabber and banter that you've come to know, love, and expect from Show Choir Nation. So a final housekeeping thing, you may notice that we're streaming on a different platform this year. We have moved over to YouTube. We're super excited about that. And we do want to keep up kind of the interactive atmosphere that we had on Instagram. So feel free to drop a comment in the live chat. We have one from Jacob already. So feel free to pile on as we talk about different director changes, as we have opinions about groups to watch, as we maybe even give predictions about competitions that are going on this weekend. Feel free to chime in if you agree, if you disagree, whatever it may be, we are absolutely here for it. With that being said, we're going to launch straight into the director changes that have happened so far in this offseason. We're going to start off with maybe not the biggest one overall, but at least one that as Midwest people, I think the three of us really had near the top of our list. And that is Mitchell High School in South Dakota, Friendicu, Nick McGraw, who had been there since the 2019-2020-ish seasons, led Friendicu through the pandemic, emerged very successful out of the pandemic. He is leaving the teaching profession, and in his place is Nick Cabarros from Lincoln Northeast High School in Nebraska. So Cabarros coming in with several years of show choir experience, led the show choir program at Lincoln Northeast, and is very hard to stand out in Nebraska, but Cabarros managed to build Lincoln Northeast into a program that was steadily growing, big numbers in both the varsity group and in the prep group, good success for a program that hadn't really been a finals caliber group for a long time. Ethan, I'm going to toss this one to you first. What do you think of this director change at Mitchell?
So first off, I want to wish the best to Mr. McGraw on all of his endeavors professionally. And I want to thank Mr. McGraw. Even though it was only a short amount of time with him at Mitchell, we got to see some fantastic shows, and we've really been blessed to see his work on stage. So the best to him. There's just something about Mitchell. I don't know if you agree, but there's just something about Mitchell and directors. It's kind of been like, it's almost a hotbed. Like if you see that position opening up, you want to, if you are a director that wants to get your name out there, you throw your hat in that ring. Off the top of my head, yeah, McGraw, Jennifer Randall, Jeff Guimar,
Chris Miller.
Chris Miller, thank you for the program. Some fantastic directors have gone there, made a drastic change in that program, and left a lasting legacy. So it's very exciting to see how he can do here, Nick Cabarros. Now, it almost also feels like my sports brain, you know. So the years before, Lincoln was not. I mean, they were good, but they were getting placements as they should. Lincoln Northeast, my apologies. Lincoln Northeast then this past season turned it around completely almost, and it's almost like he's a top coordinator in football terms, a top coordinator jumping up to a head coaching position in some sense. So it's going to be exciting to see how this translates, and I'm excited to see what Mitchell can come up with.
Yeah, I just want to circle back to your point of it feels like there's never been a director that has kind of missed at Mitchell, you know, or it would be the very rare exception for a director that missed at Mitchell, because even going back probably the last roughly 15 years, maybe a little bit more back to the start of Chris Miller's tenure there. I mean, you've had Chris Miller, you've had Jen Randall, now you've had Nick McGraw, and now you've had Nick Cabarros. And I actually see a lot of similarities in between this Nick Cabarros hire and where Nick McGraw was at the time that he was hired by Mitchell as well, because for those who are not familiar, Nick McGraw actually was directing at a really small school in the southeastern tip of Iowa called Keokuk, and he brought Keokuk to incredible heights. Like, they were absolutely dominating the 3A scene in Iowa, which is tier 2. If you're not super familiar with Iowa, they were winning competitions overall, and they were honestly bursting at the seams, and I was super glad that he was able to get that opportunity to perform on a national level at Mitchell. And kind of like you were talking about, Ethan, with Nick Cabarros, he did a lot with Lincoln Northeast. Just this past year, their second group dynamics went from a single gender group to a mixed group. And there's definitely growing interest in the program at Lincoln Northeast, and especially as we have new Lincoln schools like Northwest and Standing Bear coming up. He really did a lot with that program, and I think that he really will be given the opportunity to shine at Mitchell as well. Dylan, anything you want to add in here?
My thoughts are basically your thoughts. I think I'm really excited to see what Nick Cabarrus is able to do with Mitchell. I remember I was watching them at Wheaton South last year with all the El Paso Gridley kids, and that was a show that probably got us the most hype, maybe even more hype than Los Al, actually, and I'm very excited to see like this new era of Mitchell, see what they're bringing to the table.
Awesome. With that, we'll move on to our next director change, and that is at North Central. The Counterpoints, the Descants, and the affiliated choirs. Their longtime director, Michael Ronick, has departed from that school, and to fill his kind of curricular position, North Central hired Daria Weingartner. She was most recently at Shortridge High School in Indianapolis. However, she had previously, a little ways back, been an assistant director at Warren Central as well, directing their group, The Highlights. And they also, however, have Jared McElroy, who is still there. Jared McElroy was the director of the girls group, the Descants, and where the kind of chain of direction or the hierarchy of direction kind of falls, there are just a lot of people in that North Central creative team. And for a group that I think still for a lot of people is in that top 5 of Indiana groups, which is no small feat, obviously throwing in there Center Grove, Carmel, Franklin Central, but then right under them, Zionsville, and then North Central. This is a really big job that opened up. And especially with the Counterpoints going back to ISSMA State this year after not going back last year, there's just certainly a lot of room to fall, but also there's a whole nother level to be unlocked because North Central arguably is not one of the big 3 in Indiana. So Dylan, I'll toss this one to you first. What kind of thoughts do you have about maybe not a full-on one-to-one director change, but perhaps a little bit of a shift at North Central?
Yeah, North Central this year is coming off a lot of momentum last year. They were out there killing it last year. They beat a lot of good groups like Petal and Wheaton South, and they ended the year taking – actually, no, their second to last competition, sorry. They took the choreo caption off Carmel, which was a feat that I don't think a non-Big 3 Indiana group has done in a while. And, yeah, they have a lot of momentum going in this year, and I think a new director is going to have a really tall task to keep up that momentum and keep up North Central's legacy of being a top choir in not just Indiana but the nation. But I also think there's a lot of opportunity to bring a new twist to North Central that can really make them continue to stand out among the crowd and continue being one of the best of the best. And it's another choir that I'm very excited to see what they're bringing to the table this year. And I wish the best of luck, of course, to the directors who are currently about to enter the program.
Ethan, I know as an Illinois kid, you may not like the Indiana groups the most, but setting aside your personal statehood bias, what are your thoughts?
So I think North Central will always be one of those top 5 groups in Indianapolis / Indiana. Now, again, losing a long-term director, that will send ripples down through the program and make waves. So, they might not be the best next season. And changes there's always consequence with change. So, but I do think that them staying in-house and bringing up Jared is going to pay dividends to how this transition goes with their program. Because I still think they're going to bring it next season and the season after that long forth. Because I believe he's been there for 5 years or so. So he definitely knows what goes on in that program instead of someone coming completely new in. So they already know who the director is. They know his style. They know everything about him. So this will be actually, I believe, a great transition for North Central.
Absolutely. And I think that's the important thing to look at too, is when we look at kind of those big 3 Indiana groups, setting aside Zionsville, when we look at Bradley Gardner, who's been at Franklin Central for a long, long time, and we look at Jennifer Dice, who's been at Center Grove for a while, and we look at Kyle Barker, who is very well into his tenure at Carmel, you just can't survive at that high of a level without a very consistent leadership team. And Ethan, to your point, I think that kind of going from within to get that instead of just kind of throwing everything out and starting from scratch, I think is a very prudent move on their part as well. Moving a little bit east to Ohio, we have Findlay. Now, Findlay First Edition has a whole new creative team this year, so their longtime director, Kevin Manley, left to go teach at a different school following this past school year. The new directors of Findlay First Edition are David and Mary Beth Coolidge. David Coolidge, a faculty member at Ohio Northern University. Mary Beth Coolidge is now the curricular choir director at Findlay. Longtime choreographer Andy Haynes is no longer choreographing the group. He has been replaced with Joe Sottle and Cicely Pedregon. So Findlay was one of Ohio's top choirs last year. They've always been one of Ohio's top choirs. They very often play prominently into national events such as Show Choir Nationals, if we look at just the recent stretch that they've been going through. And I feel safe to say that Findlay is an institution in Ohio show choir, especially with a creative team that's stuck together for the better part of a quarter century. And Findlay, not to ramble too long, I promise I'll let you guys talk eventually, but Findlay's become very renowned for sticking to a very traditional sense of show choir. And that's not a good thing for some people, but that's a very good thing for other people. And I'm not here to make an opinion on that, but I'm simply asking, I guess, Ethan, I'll go here to you. Are we going to see a little bit of an identity shift out of Findlay First Edition this year with an all-new creative team?
So a part of me definitely wants this to happen. Like, I kind of do want an identity shift, but again, there is something pure about Findlay First Edition doing what they do and sticking to it, especially when they do a tap number or they do any of the theatrics that they do, and they're one of the best at it. They're a top group in the nation. However, I do think in the first couple of years they might try to stay that course, keep the kids what they're used to doing, especially because if they're so good at it, why go away from it? That's kind of my thinking. But again, new director, who knows what's really going to happen? I do think that this is going to send ripples down the program. I don't know how it's going to change. I might be thinking too far down the line, but again, in an Ohio scene that isn't really packed, but always seems ever changing, if you get what I'm saying. Example, ETC seems to be getting better every single year. Solon has its moments in certain competitions. Marysville's always so strong. So in an Ohio that seems unpredictable at times, this could really shake up Findlay.
Absolutely. Dylan, do you have anything to add?
I share a lot of opinions with Ethan on this. Like, a director changes one thing, a whole creative team basically changed. That's gonna affect a lot of things, and I'm sure that the director is going to have a like, if it's not broke, don't fix it mentality. They're going to keep a lot of what makes Findlay, but like there's gonna be, at least I predict there's going to be something new going on with their show this year, some new style, something new, because like you don't just like change your whole creative team and not have something new going on, I feel like, and I'm excited to see what Findlay brings to the table. I think they're one of the most recognizable styles in show choir, and I think a change in that style could really send ripples, not through just the program, but the show choir world in general. And I think it'll be a very interesting and exciting thing to watch.
Absolutely. In Findlay this year, they will be still attending a national competition. They will be going to, I believe, Heart of America, Orlando. I believe, because it's not Nashville and it's not LA, so that leaves Orlando. Moving on to another program, this one very near and dear to Ethan's heart. We have Troy Buchanan Express, and Ryan Cooper has been with that program since about the 2019-2020 season. He is stepping up to be lead director this year. They've been under the direction of Andrew Drinkle for a long time. Ethan, since you are the resident Troy expert of this podcast, I will toss this one to you first.
So yeah, Troy Buchanan is very dear to my heart. I'm so blessed to see them all the time. Andrew Dinkle made Troy who Troy is. They're a show that you don't miss at competitions. They always bring you joy. They always bring you happiness. They never tear to the dark side of what a creative aspect could be. But they're always a show that will make a final, and they're always a show that you want to see again, like I said earlier. So him leaving can maybe have a shift at Troy. It definitely has to, since he is the original director. But Ryan Cooper has been there for a number of years. I can kind of see him sticking the same way as Drinkle did. Sorry, excuse me. I'm very excited to see what he does, Ryan Cooper. Yeah, this is a huge change for Troy, especially what I will say later on in the show, hopefully, as they are one of the choirs I'm looking forward to watching this year, especially with all the eyes on them. So it will be interesting to see what Ryan Cooper can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Dylan, do you kind of fall in line with Ethan here? Or do you have a little bit of a different thought process?
I do mostly fall in line with Ethan here. This program has been something Andrew Drinkle's been building for so long at this point, and it's definitely a little bit sad to see him go, because like this is a veteran director in every sense of the word, but Ryan Cooper has also been there for a good number of years building up Troy, and he's learned from the best, and he knows I think he knows the way to go forward from here. We could see a shift. Obviously, I feel like him being the assistant director for Drinkle would maybe signal that there isn't going to be too much of a shift in like their show design, but also with Homewood last year, their assistant director took over, and there was a pretty big shift in their show design and what they do. So it's really 50-50 on how they go from here. I will also say though, Ryan Cooper picked one heck of a schedule to go to on his debut year. I think they're going to Franklin Central, Wheaton South, Mount Zion, a bunch of premier competitions that I think are going to put Ryan Cooper to the test. And I'm very excited to see how those competitions shake out and how they do this year.
Absolutely. The Troy schedule: Milton, Neosho, Franklin Central, Mount Zion, Wheaton, Warrenville South. I think the least competitive event out of that bunch might be Milton. And that is not an easy event by any stretch of the imagination. There's 16 groups in the mixed division for that event. So Troy, I think we'll circle back to them a little bit later in the show. But time to give a little bit of love to our single gender groups. That perhaps might be a New Year's resolution for Homeroom Show Choir, is to sprinkle in a bit more love for our single gender groups. So we're actually going to go out to Virginia, and we're going to talk about Douglas S. Freeman High School and their group Harmony in Motion. Harmony in Motion, I think it's slept on a bit by the national community for two reasons. One, because it's in Virginia, and Virginia is kind of an isolated show choir scene. And number two, DSF is a school that doesn't have a mixed show choir. They only have the women's show choir, Harmony in Motion. But they've gone toe-to-toe with pretty much everyone in Virginia, and they've come out on top. And that includes good groups: Cosby Rhapsody, Clover Hill, Iridescence, Manchester, Touch of Swing, all of that. Their longtime director, Michelle Tuck, has now left the program, and recent James Madison University grad Maddie Gilliland is now the director. So I'll open the floor to either of you, Ethan or Dylan. One of the top schools in the country, arguably maybe besides Tupelo, that just has a women's show choir and not a mixed show choir. Do you think it's going to be easy or not for Douglas S. Freeman to stay on top of that heap in Virginia this upcoming year?
So that is actually it's actually so interesting, this director change, especially when you get somebody straight out of college, because their creative mindset is going to be completely different from somebody who's been doing it for a while. And they are going to be coming in with stuff that they want to do, ground rules that they want to set, and how the program should be run. So I'm kind of excited to see how it goes. Now, like you said, not a lot of people know about Douglas S. Freeman. They don't know him until they hit our rankings, and they're like, who is Douglas S. Freeman? And why are they so high on our math or formula rankings? And it's like, well, because they dominate in Virginia and their surrounding areas. They are a very strong group. This change will be interesting. But again, I still think that they're going to be a very strong group in their region.
Yeah, Dylan, anything to add, or is this like a little bit out of your wheelhouse?
It's a little out of my wheelhouse, I will admit. One thing I will say, though, I think Virginia and also a bunch of some surrounding regions are going through like a lot of change right now. I think they're going through a big shift. I think a lot of the groups are getting better. I think there's a lot more competitiveness to it, and I think this change in director will slot in just fine with a lot of the changes that are happening in in both Virginia and surrounding regions. And I think it's a chaotic region to adapt to, but I think it'll be a very interesting region to adapt to as well.
Yeah. With that, we will head back to the territory of mixed show choirs, and we will head over to Georgia. And Tift County, their longtime director, Scott Rains, has retired. Scott Rains, very illustrious career going back, Alabama and Georgia, various programs, really built Tift County into what it is today, which is the biggest and probably strongest show choir program in Georgia. The assistant director there, Kyle Robinson, is stepping up to become the head director. So kind of sort of like a Troy Buchanan situation where longtime director leaves the program, assistant director steps up to come in and lead the program. At least for the 2024 season, Tift had a very chaotic season. The mixed group 8th Street Singing Company was kind of bouncing in between middle mixed and large mixed. The women's group Ladies' Choice won an overall grand championship ahead of the mixed group. The men's group Testosterone was definitely playing in a men's group that also included a bunch of good groups like Auburn and Tallahassee and Northwest Rankin. So, Ethan, I guess I'll throw this one to you. When we look at the future of show choir in Georgia and in Tift County, how do you see this program moving?
As of right now, I'm going to be honest, it's kind of tough. It's kind of tough looking at Tift County in Georgia and being like, yes, I know they're going to take a step forward. When you have a long-term director like Scott Rains, you know what he brings to the table. He's been doing it for a long time. He knows how to put students in the right position. And that's also, so when this position was opened up, when I originally heard about it, I was believing that this was going to be a tough position to fill. I think they went the right direction by staying in-house, just like Troy Buchanan. Because I didn't know who would want to, go to a scene that is very sparse, Scott Rains got them the competitions. He knew what to do with them. I think Tift County will still be the Tift County that we know and love. And they will still be running that Georgia scene alongside all those other great choirs that are still in there. So I think this is a good hire for Tift County.
Dylan, are you familiar with the South at all?
I'm decently familiar. I've watched a few episodes of Bradley Davis's podcast, and so Tift County is a very staple group in the South, basically the king of Georgia. And I think, like Ethan said, they're going to keep going. They're going to keep that up. And I think the South is another circuit that's definitely evolving a lot, especially in recent years. And who knows, maybe this director change will have TIFF go on the up and up a lot and really meddle with the best of the best in the South. And I'm very excited to see how this goes. And I think it's a very good hire for their program. And I think it's going to signal a bright future for their group.
Absolutely. I think that no matter who you talk to in Southern Show Choir, one of the unanimous agreements is that just the quality and the caliber of Southern shows is getting better at such a rapid pace that is really, really hard to keep up. And that's a testament to everyone in that scene collectively. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about some big picture stuff later on today or perhaps in next week's episode. But moving to a Southern adjacent circuit, again, a circuit that is getting bigger and getting better at a very fast clip. We have Keller Central, Voices of Central and Voltage in Texas. This program, I believe, is one of the only show choir programs in the country this past offseason to have not one, not two, but three different directors leave the program after the end of the school year. So their three former directors, Leanne McClure, Nick Shabit, and Casey Levi, all left at the end of the school year. Nick Shabit is now the director at Burleson Centennial, so he will be heading up Shades of Blue this next season. the original announce director for Voices of Central, Rashad Callahan, he, for whatever reason, wound up backing out of that job before the school year even started. So now the new director of Keller Central Voices of Central is going to be Crystal Hicks. And again, when we look at a Texas show choir scene that is moving forward at a breakneck pace, we now have 6 competitions in Texas this year. That's as many as Minnesota. That's as many as Virginia. Texas is a very legitimate show choir scene. Voice of Central is the institution of Texas show choir. It's the OG Texas show choir program. It is the one that has been dominant for the most amount of time. Dylan, factoring in all of that and having not 1, not 2, not 3, maybe even I'll call it 3.5 directors leave since the end of last season. How does a program move forward from that?
That's a lot like what I said about Finley earlier. That's gonna cause a lot of shakeup within their creative team, and also like some other groups I mentioned earlier, they're also coming off of quite a bit of momentum this last season. I don't think they got a grand championship last season, but they were able to take off the vocal caption from Pedal, who is a historically very strong Southern group, which I think may show a testament that Texas may be evolving enough that it might be ready to take on the national scene in only a couple of years. And I think this big shift could really take Keller Central into a new light, and maybe they could reclaim their spot as top show choir in Texas, and maybe they'll have like a creative shift where they're like completely unrecognizable from the old style of shows they did. But it's a very crazy thing that's happening, but also a very exciting thing that's happening, and a very exciting thing that's happening in one of the most exciting circuits in show choir right now. And I think that could do a lot to further shake up the circuit and as well as the national scene for Texas show choir. And I'll leave it.
Yes, the show design team at Keller Central also did swap around this year. So I don't know if the show, you will be able to tell that it's a new show designer, but there is a new show design team at Keller Central as well. Just one more in the interest of time. I'll throw this one to Ethan right after I get it out. But Greta East High School in Nebraska, their group Equinox debuted last year. Patrick Reiber, the longtime director at Gretna, moved over to Greta East. Nathan Wallace is now the new co-director of Greta East Equinox. And that's notable for a couple reasons. Number one, Nathan Wallace, a very accomplished show choir director in the middle school ranks at a lot of the Elkhorn and Millard area middle schools. Also did some choreography for a number of groups for a few years. So I think it's a great pickup for Gretna East just simply on that alone. But the thing that makes it perhaps double the fun or double the irony is that Nathan Wallace's wife, Caitlin Wallace, is director of Gretna Revolution right across town. So not often that you see that kind of duo moving forward. But Ethan, Gretna East competed in small school division last year, might be primed to make a break into large mixed this year, picking up a co-director and a very potent one at that. Where does it put Gretna East heading into this season?
First off, that's just such an interesting dynamic. I don't want to know what the dinner table is like afterwards, after a competition against each other. No, I'm just kidding. I bet they both support each other well, and I bet their programs will do a lot of things together, whether that be preview shows or go to competitions together, host competitions together. I'm excited to see how that dynamic will really turn out because it's something I've never seen before. I'm excited to see this turn for Gretna East. Now, there's always that sophomore slump that people always talk about, whether it be sports, work, whatever. So it is something to keep your eye out. But adding this assistant director seems like that they want more eyes on this group on an everyday basis, or at least in practice, to help with the everyday. So it might be that this program is growing faster than we think, that they need more hands-on. Again, they are in a tough region, so popping out right away is going to be hard. But I think that they have the right tools to be a great group in Gretna East.
Absolutely. And that will wrap up the segment of director changes. We kind of flew through a lot. I think we rolled for roughly a half hour straight on director changes. So I think we got over a half dozen covered. So hopefully you were able to keep up with all of us and keep track. But we're going to roll straight into talking about even more groups. We're trying to give love to as many different groups as we can. So we're going to talk about groups that we are excited to watch or see how they do in this upcoming 2025 season. And we'll start this segment off with a comment. We have a comment from Jasmine that rolled in just a few minutes ago. So excited for people to see New Mexico's underground show choir in March. I think a lot of people are. I don't know if Jasmine is from New Mexico or not, but I would say that La Cueva should be on a lot of people's groups to watch this year. The one time they competed last year at Heart Encore, they wound up taking I believe the showmanship caption away from Burbank in Sync. And anytime that you take a caption award away from kind of a big three California group, I think it really shows the potency of that program. And I believe La Cueva is going to be competing twice this year instead of just once. So we will have another opportunity to see both underground and their women's group, which I want to say is Sapphire Sounds, that they're in intermediate women's. So Ethan or Dylan, either one of you, have you seen a La Cueva show? Have you heard of La Cueva? And are you excited to see them this upcoming season?
I have not seen a show, but I've definitely seen results. And they are definitely showing that they are growing as a program and want to definitely keep your eyes on. So thank you for that comment, for reminding me that we should never sleep on a New Mexico show choir group. Because, I mean, if you talk about states out west, New Mexico kind of gets lost in that group. Because you think of Arizona was Valley Vista, so on and so forth. I'm excited. I'm excited to see Underground this season. I definitely will make a case to watch their show this year. And it might be sooner rather than later if they can make a big splash early in March or whatever when they first perform with all the other California groups.
Absolutely. And sticking with the theme out west, I think one of the groups that I'm super excited to watch this upcoming season is Glendora Royal Stewarts. And this may just be me manifesting someone to challenge the big three into existence, but a lot of California show choir gets kind of slept on besides that real big group of three up at the top. But Glendora, quietly or not, probably not quietly for those who are out west, but perhaps quietly for the rest of the country, assembled a very solid competition record last year in that advanced mixed 2 division. Now, granted, they certainly were duking it out with a lot of other contenders, but Glendora is a program that has a ton of momentum. Glendora is a group that showed last season that when they are on, they are on. I'm looking for them to really emerge as a standout group that can maybe kind of slot into what Brea Olinda was for a while when they were in advanced mix, just kind of that bulwark that, okay, maybe they won't be on the level of the top 3, but they're going to be a really, really good group right under that and perhaps ahead of the rest of the pack in California. Dylan, do you keep up with California advanced show choir at all? And if so, where do you think Glendora fits into that picture?
I think Glendora is a group on the rise currently. And I know every year, as you said, there's always that question. It's one of the biggest questions people ask each year. Is the Cali Big Three going to have a challenger this year in their home circuit? And I feel like for a while, the one people say is JFK because they're the other one that really competes in the division with the Big Three. But Glendora, I mean, there's a lot of groups that could easily move up into that division in show choir in general because California is a really big and storied circuit beyond the Big Three. And I think if Glendora can keep up this momentum, maybe not this year they could challenge the Big Three, but in the near future, who knows? I think they might be something for the Big Three to look out for.
Yeah, and granted, we were just talking about La Cueva, and La Cueva did beat Glendora last year, so like we referenced earlier, certainly not a perfect season in division, but darn near close to that for Glendora. We do have another comment, may have missed it, but talk about North Central. We did actually talk about North Central towards the beginning of the show, so right after this live stream ends and it gets posted on YouTube, feel free to look back to that part of the podcast and you'll be able to hear our thoughts about it. I'll toss this next to Ethan. I feel like you may be bringing up a familiar name for a group that you want to watch this year.
Yeah, I'm going to be quick because we kind of already talked about them, but Troy Buchanan Express and their program as a whole is one I'm going to be keeping my eyes on. Thankfully, I'll be going down to their competition, I hope, weather permitting, and of course, everything else. So I will be seeing their show. I love that program. Their program dear to my heart. So last year, they didn't go to as many competitions. I believe they went to 4 along those lines off the top of my head. And I believe they won 3 of them. They went 3 out of 4. But again, some people were questioning the quality of wins, so to say. They were going up against competition, but not the competitions that they are sort of known for, if that makes any sense. Their last competition, I believe they went out east, and they lost to with the Cosby, and they lost to John Burroughs along with Chesterton, where they'll be heading this year, who are 2 very solid groups, do not get me wrong. But kind of surprised a few people when Troy got 3rd place. So it will be interesting, especially with this director change. Will it change up the themes? Will they change up how they do things? I will say, as Dylan mentioned earlier in the show, their competition schedule is fierce, more fierce than it should be for a first-time full-on director. But I feel like Troy is a group that can shock people this year if they get their showdown early and if they can knock out some of these groups right away. So I'm very excited to see how Troy Express does this year.
Dylan, we're going to toss it to you. What is a group that you are super excited to watch and see how they do in the 2025 show choir season?
This group is for my home state of Illinois, so I'm maybe a little biased on this one, but Warrenville South this year, they always, of course, have a solid competition schedule. They like going to competitive events, but this year they're running the gauntlet. They're going to Bloomington Kennedy, where they'll face Waconia and Hastings. They're going to Homewood, El Paso Gridley. They'll face Mount Zion and Naperville North there. And then they're ending their season at Mount Zion, which, as we said earlier, is the premier event of the season. They're going to face Brandon, Grenada, Loveland, a bunch of insane groups. And yeah, I feel like Wheaton South usually has at least one competition on their schedule every year that's like they're the consensus favorite to win. But this year, they could realistically go winless, which sounds like complete blasphemy to say, but I also think they could go undefeated this year. And I think this is a schedule where they have a lot to prove. But if any group can step up to the challenge, it's Warrenville South. There's not a lot of scenarios you can count them out in, and I don't see a scenario as tough as their schedule is. I don't see a scenario where you can. And I think they're going to have a lot of chances to prove that they're one of the best in the Midwest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I I just really don't know how saying the phrase Warrenville South might go win this year feels in my brain and feels talking about it, but you're absolutely right. In addition to all the competitions you mentioned, they're also going to be at Glenwood. And something that I find super interesting is that they're going to face off twice against Oak Mountain Singers from Alabama, which is certainly not the group that I would have picked them to go against twice. But Ethan, as the other Illinois boy in this podcast, do you agree with Dylan? Do you have a bone to pick with Dylan about his analysis? Where is Warrenville South heading into this year?
No, I agree with my fellow Illinoisian to a point. I think they will. Now, again, they have those seasons, like example, Wheaton North does. Wheaton North, their counterpart, always has that one season where they are the best group that I believe sometimes in the nation. Wheaton North 2017 was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. And then they kind of fall back a tad, still being dominant, but they are getting more thirds and seconds because they're going up against a tougher competition. And, of course, everything evolves. Wheaton Warrenville South, I believe it was 2018 when they had the roller coaster show. And it was one of the best shows that I've ever seen live again. Wheaton has that impression on people. Them going up against some of these groups, they've done this before. Now, I will say this year it seems more on top of each other, if that makes any more sense. Like at one competition, you might get 3 groups that are really, really good. Instead of like they would go a whole season and have maybe like a really good competitor at one comp or 2 comps or, so on and so forth. But again, they've run a gauntlet before. Now, if they go winless, that can happen. So That can happen to any choir. Catch Clinton losing every comp this year. No, I'm kidding. That's a complete joke. But again, I think Dylan's analysis is right. And I'm, again, just like every other group we talked about, I'm super excited to see Wheaton, Warrenville South.
Absolutely. We do have a quick question from the chat. Have you guys gone over the Indiana circuit? That is too much to squeeze into one national focused episode. So we will certainly swing back towards the Indiana circuit about when that circuit gets going towards the end of January. We've got a few minutes left for this segment, so we'll do a lightning round now. One more group that each of us is looking forward to, just roughly a minute of what group and why you are excited to watch this group. I will start our swing down south with Jackson Academy Encore. This is a group that is super duper interesting to me, and the guys over at the warm-up room also had a pretty good conversation about this in their episode that dropped earlier today, Monday, December 30th as well. JA was a group that really put a lot of people on notice right at the beginning of last season. They swept Brandon at the beginning of the year at Jackson Prep, and a lot of people thought Brandon was going to be really good last year, and a lot of people may have been rethinking that, or perhaps rethinking if they underestimated JA right after that result at Prep. But for the rest of the year, Jackson Academy couldn't really overperform, I guess, as much as they did at Jackson Prep. They were still a very good group, don't get me wrong, but when you look at things like making finals at Show Choir Nationals would have been a gigantic bump for JA compared to just walking home. No matter what prelims placement they just were on the outside finals. JA has a new director this year. Jacob Butson is the new director at JA. He is formerly of Brandon Middle School. Very big show choir resume behind him, going back even to kind of his high school days. Garrett Lindsay is back to Alabama. I do not believe he is directing a competitive show choir this year. But JA, when you look at where they're going this year, they're going to have plenty of tests. They are starting the season at Jackson Prep. They're also going to Tupelo, and they're also going to Glenwood as well. So plenty of tests in the South and out. I will swing it over to Ethan to continue our Southern swing.
Yeah, let's just keep it right there. And I mean, this is a group I never thought that I'd be saying, especially this early in the season. I'm excited for Grenada. I'm super excited for Grenada. We have the opportunity to be so lucky to see them perform at Mount Zion. I feel like everyone's coming to Illinois this year in some way or another. So truly blessed to be in the central Illinois. But Grenada, fantastic year last year. Some would probably say they're best. Now, again, that's some people, not me. I'm just reading what I read. Shout out to Tony, our excellent Southern writer. He's where I get majority of my information, as well as those Southern boys down there. So they had an amazing year last year, one of their best, second place at Nationals. Many kind of didn't see that coming, but when they were slowly growing throughout the season, people were like, they could win this thing. They could win this thing. They get second. They put themselves on the map. But again, I'm going off of our season previews that we're doing, Return of the Contenders, and our writer Trey said they are one of the more inconsistent groups in the South. Now, take that as you want. I am excited to see if they can grow off this and I can't wait to see them while we are doing our thing at Mount Zion this year. So, Grenada Visions are a group I'm watching out for.
Dylan, you might take us a little farther north, but I think this is a group that can still somewhat be considered a group from the Southern United States of America.
That group's Broken Arrow. I didn't see them at Wheaton South last year. I just missed them. I'm still kicking myself in the leg for that. But they got fifth at that competition, which was like one spot out of finals, beat some really good groups. And so they have a lot of momentum going in this season. And like Wheaton Warrenville South, they have a really tough schedule, but they're just going everywhere this season. They're going like up to Minnesota. They're going to California. Their big competition's going to be Urbandale in Iowa, which is essentially Wheaton Warrenville South Iowa edition. And they're a group that I think is another group that's on the up and up since the pandemic, and they have a lot to prove this year. And I think that this is the type of schedule where they're like, all right, let's prove what we got to prove. And it's going to be really interesting to see where they place in a lot of the competitions and a lot of the circuits that they're heading to this year.
Absolutely. They've been a program to watch for a while, and certainly the added wrinkle of that this year, the Broken Arrow program is going from 3 choirs to 2. The freshman choir Tiger Momentum folded, and those performers will be now in with the single gender group Tiger Mystique. So I don't know if that says anything bad about Broken Arrow. Obviously, numbers ebb and flow, even in the most successful of programs, but certainly something interesting to note about Broken Arrow as we head into this season. Even though it is December 30th, we do have show choir competitions coming up this very Saturday. We have 2, no, that's 4 fingers. We have 2 show choir competitions coming up. Both of them are in Wisconsin, my great, great home state. Every year, I realize more and more how it's just not normal for the rest of the country to do this. That doesn't make it any less exciting for me. I still love that Wisconsin does it, but kind of going up through high school, I was like, yeah, of course it's the expectation to like have your show comp ready by like December 21st or whenever Christmas break started. That way you could just come back, have like a rehearsal after Christmas and put it out on the competition stage. Clearly that's not the case for the rest of the country, but we're going to start off with a competition that is in its inaugural edition. We have the Tomah Cranberry Jamboree held in Tomah, Wisconsin, right outside one of America's leading cranberry producing regions, I should say. So that goes to the Cranberry Jamboree name. The lineup for this one in the middle school division, we have Onalaska in the middle and Onalaska top of the middle. In the women's division, we have West Salem Vivace and El Paso Gridley High Fidelity. And in the mixed division, Altoona Locomotion, Eau Claire Memorial Old Abe Show Choir, El Paso Gridley Modulations, New London Vision, and West Salem Sensations. I'll start on this one for a little bit. Just a couple things to note here. The West Salem Vivace group, the single gender group, they actually did not compete at all in 2024. So this will be their first competition appearance since I think the middle of February 2023. Altoona Locomotion is under new direction. Their director for, I believe, the past 7 years, maybe 6, but I believe 7, Justin Rannick. He is now at New London Middle School. We also have a couple groups that for Wisconsin standards are riding a good bit of momentum coming off of 2024. Eau Claire Memorial made finals everywhere they went across a 4 competition season. That was the first time they did that in almost a decade. And we also New London, which had a bit of a rockier season, but in my Wisconsin opinion is certainly still on the come up. Ethan, just any thoughts you might have about any of these groups? And I know Dylan's got an ace in the hole as well.
Yeah, so this competition is interesting. There might not be a lot of groups there, but the ones I do know about are ones that are kind of want to keep your eye on this season as well. Definitely a lot of change, especially in Wisconsin. And I mean, we'll get there with the next competition as well. So to see who can topple who, especially in that great state of Wisconsin Will is from. So I would hate to see a Wisconsin competition go to an Illinois group, Will. I would hate to see it. I would hate to see it for your sake. But I think El Paso Mixed will take the win here. I think New London has a good shot, but again, especially with it being this early, because it being this early, no one knows anything. What people know is what they are doing in-house. So very interested to see how El Paso does here. I know Dylan is from the area, so my one question to Dylan, besides me seeing I think El Paso might win, I do have a question. What's it like, especially being from Illinois? Because I don't know. Being from a region that doesn't perform this early ever since the Mount Zion Invitational moved to March, to go to a competition this early and to practice over winter break, what's that like?
So El Paso's preview show is in like 3 days, and then a day later they go to the competition. That's what it was like the past couple of years too, and it's just crazy to do. It's just no other Illinois group competes this early, and sometimes there's a little early season jank that affects all groups early season, of course, but I think it gives us a good way to like see where we're at, and so that we can go into the better part of the season just as good as we can. And I do think even with said early season jank, which I don't know if I'm not in it this year. I don't know what the show's going to be like at all this year. So it could be really good, and we'll just have to see. I do think El Paso is going to win here. I do think New London will be in second, and I think another thing to know is High Fidelity. Where will they place? I know even less about them this year, and I think they have a really good shot at placing second. I don't think El Paso has gone 1 and 2 for like a while now. I know they have in the past, but it's been a bit. So that'd be really cool to see them do. And I will be at Tomah, so I'm going to see what happens there live, and I'm excited to see how El Paso does, of course, and I'm excited to see how the other groups stack up.
Absolutely. Well, I am the opinion guy on this podcast. That's how I make my living. I don't really know a lot, so that's Ethan's part of the show. I come in and I provide the hot takes. So I will go out on a limb and I will say that El Paso Gridley will go 1 and 2 here. I'll take mods, taking vocals, choreo, and band, and I'll take High Fidelity in second. I think to round out my finals, I will take New London third, Eau Claire Memorial fourth. I'll take West Salem mixed fifth and West Salem girls sixth. Moving on to the other competition that's literally only 40 minutes down Interstate 94. We have 2 show choir competitions in the entire country this weekend, and they're happening within an hour of each other. We have the Holmen Gathering, and this one in the prep division, we have Drummond Jack Attack, Medford Momentum, and Onalaska Express. In the women's division, Sauk Prairie YTBN, Sparta Rise of Adrenaline, and Sioux Falls Jefferson Revelry. In the mixed division, La Crosse River City Revolution, Chippewa Falls Chi-Hi Harmonics, DeForest DeFortes, Neenah Vintage, Plymouth Momentum, Sioux Falls Jefferson Legacy, Reedsburg Coraliers, Sparta Upstage Adrenaline, Sauk Prairie Executive Session, and Onalaska Hilltoppers. Couple notes about this one. This is the first appearance for the new combined La Crosse River City Revolution group. That is what was formerly known as La Crosse Central Grand Central Station and Logan the Class Act. They are now combined into one group. And also we have Sioux Falls Jefferson coming all the way from South Dakota for this one. So certainly a couple of wild cards in the field here. Ethan, I'll toss this one to you before I get real deep into my Wisconsin analysis.
Just a real question first off. Single gender and prep are allowed to make finals here, correct?
I don't know, but I honestly don't know if I would pick any of them as finals groups.
Well, I was kind of eyeballing maybe Onalaska Express, but again, this is a really good lineup. So I just wanted to give them some praise that I was thinking about putting them in there. So this is
all right, good for them.
Yeah, hey, shout outs. So you said you're the hot take guy. No, you know this. You know this, Will. So I'm a huge storyline guy. And this is I love a storyline. Who doesn't love a storyline, Will? You're a writer. You love
I'm a writer.
You love storylines. And your storyline
I do love storylines.
The combined group wins. That would be an all-time storyline. One of the first competitions of a new year, a brand new group who had a combined wins the competition. So I'm going to roll with it. And if they do, credit me. Don't really know. Credit the group. They're the ones who put the hard work in to get to this point. But, of course, Onalaska is the big name here. They're the one that's favored, of course, by the people. And they're the one that's probably going to win. But in my right mind, I am going to go lacrosse. I'm only going to do a top 4 here. I'm going to go lacrosse. I'm going to go Onalaska. I'll do Sparta, then Sauk Prairie. I feel like putting Sparta that low and Sauk Prairie being that low is kind of a mess in my head, especially if I want a lacrosse win. But if I want a lacrosse win, something like that has to happen. So I'm rooting for every choir here because they are fantastic. I'm excited to see how this one shakes out.
Well, I can't believe you didn't even mention Sioux Falls Jefferson and all that. Dylan, quick hits for predictions or any other thoughts on Holmen?
I do think Onalaska is the favorite to win here, but I also don't think they're invincible. I do think an upset could easily happen here. I do think they will most likely take the vocal caption. Visually, though, I think there's some danger for them to be had there because Sparta is a group that's really on the up in Wisconsin, and they took choreography from Tomah, who last year also took choreography from Onalaska. So there's a little chain there that can maybe and also lacrosse, River City Revolution. They're Logan and Lacrosse Central. While they haven't been as successful post-pandemic, they're still two very good and storied Wisconsin groups that, when merged, could be especially very dangerous. As well as Sauk Prairie, of course. They could very well take the visual caption. They're always a good visual group, and if they have a good year, who knows? For predictions, I think I'm going to go on Alaska with I'm going to go with a sweep for Alaska. I'm going to play this a little bit safe. I'm going to go Sparta in second, actually, and then River City Revolution in third, and Sauk Prairie in fourth. And I think I'm going to go, is Reedsburg here? Oh, yeah. I'm going to go Reedsburg in fifth because they made finals at a even more stacked competition last year, and they're another Wisconsin group that's up on the rise. They're dangerous. I could see them making some noise here, so I'm going to put them in fifth.
All right. Well, I will just run through my top five pretty quickly, and then I'll dive into a couple things. My top five: I want Alaska sweeping vocals, choreo band. Can't remember the first weekend of January show I watched from Onalaska that wasn't well put together. At least by the time we got to finals, maybe a couple of years in prelims, there were a couple things. But by the time we get to finals, even though it's the first weekend of the year, Onalaska is always buttoned up. And I've been watching Onalaska first weekend of January shows since 2017. Nothing ever changes. Nothing ever happens. In second place, I will put Sparta. Sparta went a different way in terms of choreography this year. They picked up Kevin Chase. And Kevin Chase is a force to be reckoned with in this field. Obviously, the people that Onalaska has, I'm not entirely sure who they have this year, but last year, I believe it was Jared Voss and Damon Brown. So obviously great names as well, but I'll pick Sparta to take a step up from where they were last year. In third, I'll take Sioux Falls Jefferson. A real wild card. I have no idea where they're going to slot in with the Wisconsin groups. It's just where I'm going to put them. In fourth place, I will put Sauk Prairie. I think that's just where they are going to be for the start of the season. I'll put lacrosse in fifth place. I know, Ethan, it would be a tremendous storyline if they won. I'm going to take the storyline of growing pains. And I just think, when you add basically two whole entire existing choirs together, people are used to doing things one way. People are used to doing things a different way. The way that they get done now is probably a little bit of a different way. So in a little bit, it's like starting from scratch. There are a lot of different ways that the sixth position could go here. Reedsburg was the choice last year. Reedsburg was the group that, in kind of a similar situation, because basically last year you had a big top five of Waconia, Cedar Rapids, Washington, Onalaska, Sparta, and Sauk Prairie. And then it was just kind of a madhouse for the sixth spot. Reedsburg performed before lunch, and they wound up getting that sixth final spot. You also have Neenah, who had a real interesting year last year. I believe they were actually one of the bottom groups of this competition due to a pretty massive time penalty in prelims. They have a new choreographer this year as well. Jeff Jordan is choreographing Neenah. But a group that I'm really looking at, and a group that I think I'm going to put in my sixth spot, is Plymouth Momentum. This is an absolute shot-in-the-dark pick based off past records, just looking on paper. But whereas I feel like a lot of these other groups are kind of inconsistent, Neenah was very up and down last year. Reedsburg was a little bit up and down as well after a really solid first weekend. I just feel like Plymouth is the group that's going to knock on the door, and this year is going to be that group that answers the call, makes finals, and starts their season off on a tremendous right foot. Folks, we have 2 competitions this upcoming weekend. We have 5 the weekend after that. Ethan or Dylan, any closing thoughts? We've taken up way too much of our viewers' time. We're 4 minutes over time. Any closing thoughts as we move into the first show choir weekend and the first weekend overall of 2025?
Excitement. I love all the unknowns. It's the only time you kind of get that, so you kind of have to enjoy it. We have so much content coming out. Please check the website. Fantastic stuff is going on with our writers and contributors, as well as our video people and graphics. So I want to give a huge shout out to them as well, because they're behind the scenes and jumping into it. Some of them for their first season, some of them for their second. So it's going to be a roller coaster of a ride, and I'm excited to go on it with everybody. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today, and excited for this season.
Absolutely. With that being said, if you are competing this weekend, good luck. If you are watching this weekend, have a phenomenal time. And for everyone else, we will see you right back here, YouTube, next week, Monday, 7 Eastern, 6 Central, for Show Choir Nation. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Happy New Year.